Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Robert Jensen. He's an author and a professor of journalism at the University of Texas at Austin. Hi, Bob.
Hello, Sonali.
Well, the Arab world's poorest nation, Yemen, appears to be on the verge of a coup. Rebel Houthi fighters have surrounded the presidential palace after a day of major fighting that left at least 3 people dead. The rebels, who've also taken over the state-run media, claimed control of the capital, Sana'a, last September. They are reportedly aligned with Iran's Shiite majority. There has been a ceasefire in Sana'a as talks commenced between rebel leaders and President Abdurabu Mansour Hadi. However, just minutes ago, there's been breaking news that rebels have reportedly stormed the presidential palace. The U.S. State Department is closely monitoring the situation. Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Yemen had claimed responsibility for the January 7th massacre in Paris. The Houthi push into Sunni-dominated areas of Yemen has apparently increased support for Al-Qaeda. Well, Bob, how do you think Yemen's takeover by Houthi rebels could impact politics in the region? Bob? And we're going to call Bob right back just to reiterate the question, which is the situation in Yemen right now on the verge of a coup. We're getting breaking news that rebels in Yemen, who already had taken over the capital, Sana'a, some months ago, have now taken over the presidential palace, and that just has happened within the last hour. There's been heavy fighting in the capital, Sana'a. Bob, are you with us?
Yes.
Yes. And so how do you think this could impact politics in the region?
Well, I doubt the State Department is really aware of what's really going on the ground there. Yemen is a very fluid place, and some of this is about concerns about corruption, the long-standing concerns that the Yemeni government is in fact not serving the needs of very many people at all. I think what we shouldn't do is assume that the Houthis are simply an arm of Iran. This is what the U.S. tends to do. It looks for simplistic answers. So as all of this is developing, I don't think you and I can really know what's happening, but we can know what we shouldn't think, which is to accept what is often State Department and U.S. government propaganda about how everything emanates from Tehran.
And we'll certainly be monitoring the situation in Yemen and hoping to cover it in the next few days. And on the other end of the Arabian Peninsula from Yemen, Islamic State fighters in Syria and northern Iraq have released yet another video, this time threatening to kill 2 Japanese nationals, Kenji Goto and Haruna Yukawa. ISIS is demanding $200 million from the Japanese government as ransom. In recent days, the group has also released photos and videos of the torture and killing of Arabs, including pushing men suspected of being gay off of high towers to their deaths and stoning a woman accused of adultery. ISIS has also reportedly crucified 17 young men. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues its air war against ISIS, striking targets in Syria and Iraq at least 29 times on Saturday. Well, Bob, we tend to hear disproportionately more about the Islamic State's foreign captives, but aren't fellow Arabs and Muslims being killed in even higher numbers and equally gruesome ways by this group?
Yeah, this is a time where it's hard not to be cynical because, of course, in the West, especially the United States, there's an obsession with white American, European victims. And of course, the United States government often ignores the incredible destruction in the third world. However, when we emphasize all of the sort of brutality and callousness of a group like ISIS, we also want to resist the instinct to say, well, we have to do something, and that something is never more than bombing. So we have to hold a lot of different things in our head at the same time. ISIS is brutal. ISIS is destructive primarily to people on the ground there. It's also a threat to the United States, but the answer is not simply to step up bombing. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work.
And finally, here in the United States, yesterday's celebrations of Martin Luther King Day had a decidedly more militant tone in many cities as activists attempted to reclaim King's radical legacy. Marked by growing public outrage over police killings of African Americans, thousands marched with banners reading Black Lives Matter. The coalition Ferguson Action put out a call saying, quote, "Do as Martin Luther King would have done and resist the war on Black lives with civil disobedience and direct action. Take the streets, shut it down, walk, march, and whatever you do, take action." The protests were publicized on social media with the hashtags ReclaimMLK and WWMLKDo. In addition to big cities like LA and New York, there were major gatherings in St. Louis, Missouri and Cleveland, Ohio, where the deaths of Michael Brown and Tamir Rice have galvanized movements. Meanwhile, a petition urging President Obama to invite the family members of Rice, Brown and other victims of police violence to tonight's State of the Union address has been signed by 45,000 people. Bob, was MLK an appropriate day, you think, to protest police violence?
Appropriate, of course, yes. And many of us have for years felt very frustrated that corporate America and white America has embraced MLK Day, not for the reasons you're suggesting, because of his radical legacy and the critique he offers, but in fact because that whole day had been sanitized. So this was a very exciting and I think hopeful moment yesterday. The question now is where to go from this, of course, and I think people around the country are asking, how do we take the anger, the energy that's been in the streets and turn it toward long-term organization building and shifts in policy? I think that's what King would want us to do, is to stay angry, but to channel that anger into productive political activity. And that's, I think, the future.
Bob Jensen, always a pleasure to have you on. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Anna.
Robert Jensen is our daily Newsflash guest expert. He's an author and a professor of journalism at the University of Texas at Austin. We'll be right back.